Welcome to today's conversation on the extraordinary film Finding Yingying that we at CAM are so very proud to support. Today's talkback panel is with talented new filmmaker Jenny Shi, together with Oscar-nominated producer Diane Quon and the award-winning producer Brent E. Huffman. The panel will be moderated by the award-winning filmmaker and dear CAM friend Yung Chang. So without further ado, please welcome our panel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this this talk back. Where to begin? I mean, this is such a sensitive, thoughtful, and humanistic look into what I feel is very much a family drama. And when I watch it, I'm just so touched at the intimacy and the connection Jiayan had with the family in the film. And also I can't help but reflect on being a father of a young daughter and thinking about those conflicts around the feelings of just to see where the trial ends up in the film, with the idea of capital punishment and such. So I want to kind of have this discussion around your movie, and I'm so curious, maybe just to kick things off, Jenny, maybe you can talk a little bit about the classic question of just how you got into this film. We know you had a connection to just being there at the time. So talk about that a little bit. What was that like?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, for having the conversation with us and spreading the words for the film. So for me, when I first heard about Ying's disappearance was, I think 4 years ago already, the summer of 2017. When she first went missing, I got a message on my WeChat. Actually, it was from my college alumni group chat. And during that time, I was still a student at Northwestern University. And actually, I was in Brent class. I was a student of him. When I read the message, it said, someone went missing. She's a Chinese student. She went missing from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And I was really worried about her own safety, especially when I knew that, she was new here, probably didn't know much about the surroundings. So I was just like anyone else, spreading the words, trying to see, if anyone can find her. And I think that was maybe a week after her disappearance. Ying's father and the boyfriend and her aunt actually arrived in the US to search. And I knew that there were a lot of Chinese students. They were supporting the family down in the Urbana-Champaign area. And I also went there to see what I could do to help them. And as a journalism student, I was definitely curious about what happened and what was going to happen. So that's how I got to visit the family and started to think about maybe I can, use my own camera to start to document things, even though I didn't really know what's going to happen next. And I also met a volunteer whose name is Shiling Sun. He was a student at U of I, and he was actually, he later actually became one of the cinematographers and also the co-producer of the film. So we basically thinking about document what's going on. And that's how I, got involved in the story.
So you were coming at it more as a no idea where the film was going to go, no idea that you had the inklings of making a film as it exists now. You're just sort of going with your instinct a little bit. Were you approaching it from a journalistic point of view, or what background are you coming from when you were in those early days of documenting the story?
Yeah, so for me, I didn't go to film school. I was in a documentary journalism class at that time. So all the background I have are really about journalistic skills. Get to know people and to figure out what happened. But on the other hand, I really think about how the footage I captured could help the family. I knew that, they were really worried about Ying's safety and they wanted to search on their own, but they also had the concern that, maybe several weeks later or months later, nothing really happened, whether it's going to be a cold case and whether people would still pay attention to them and to Yingying. So when I pitched the idea to them, basically said, I'm going to, document what's going on, and maybe if it's possible, document your journeys, and also started to document the places Ying used to study, used to work. That might be helpful. You might use this footage later, in future. And they just feel, it was a good idea. So that's how I basically started. To be honest, in the early days, we didn't even know what exactly happened to Yingying. We didn't even know, they're going to be like a trial, 2 years later, and there are so much things going to happen during the whole process. For me, I was just, being there, of course, curious as a journalist, but I also have, different roles like a volunteer and also someone really cared about Yingying and her family.
Yeah, and I feel like draw the line that connects us to Brent. Then I know he was, your professor. Was that it? And so what exactly? How did this all? At what point were you like, okay, I'm onto something. This is bigger than what I think. There's a feature documentary here. Can you connect all that for me a little bit?
Me or Jenny? Or Jenny?
Throwing it out to anyone, whoever wants to kind of talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
I mean, I could say a little bit about that. I guess it has been about 4 years. So I'm a documentary filmmaker. I was Jenny's professor. She was an incredible student. And I think, like she talked about, that she really had this desire to help the family and really had this desire to have, if there was a film, that would come out of this, that the film would help. And I think that's so important that this film sort of started from that place. And I think Jenny did an incredible job, even as a student, building trust with the family. And I think really explaining the process. So almost like she was teaming up with the family in some way to make this film. So it started off as a student project. It actually won some awards, and then I came on as a producer after Jenny graduated to kind of help the film develop into a feature length. In the very beginning, I think we were really hopeful that Yingying had just ran away from home, or disappeared. So there was this really kind of dramatic roller coaster process of things kind of constantly changing. And I don't know if Jenny wants to talk more about some of that.
Yeah, so after I graduated, I decided to continue working on this project because I really see somehow, I found I can see like my own story, my own experience in Ying's story. And I really, really passionate about this project. So I applied to the Diverse Voices in Documentary program at Cartoon Films. And that's where I learned a lot of skills, how to write proposals, editing demos, and pitch it to potential founders. And I really learned the skills and experience to build the film into a feature-length documentary. And that's also where I met Diane. So yeah, maybe Diane, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, so the film is a Kurtempuan film, and Kurtempuan is based in Chicago. It has been around for 50 years. And what I really appreciate is they started this Diverse Voices uh, program. And actually, Bing, who was my first film, Bing Liu of My in the Gap, he was a Diverse Voices fellow too. And he had invited me to see his screening, a work in progress screening, Mine in the Gap, and I had attended, and that's how we got together. Jenny and Brent invited me to a screening of her student project, which is about 25 minutes long at Kurtempuan. And I just was so impressed with what I saw. And I say this all the time, but also as much as I was impressed with the story and the idea that, like you said, it's not a true crime story. It was just her vision of like really trying to understand the family and being sensitive about the ethics of covering their story. I was so impressed with Jenny, and that she kept asking those questions already about what is the right way to shoot, what's the right way to capture the story. So when I think a couple months, maybe a month or so later, she asked if I would be part of the producing team. And I said yes, because just as important to me as the story is Jenny. I mean, she was
Well, I mean,
fearless.
yeah, what strikes me is that, you put the hands of a story like this into somebody else, and the end result will be something very, very different, of course.
Mhm.
And I think there's something about lived experience and also perspective that's so crucial in the outcome of this, what this film gives us, which is a perspective that I think, many, I would say many Westerners just don't see. And the beauty of this film that's so moving is that you followed the direction of getting in close and with the family and the Chinese family. And essentially it's because of that connection. I feel like it's just unique and essential, right? And in the way you handled that. And I'm wondering, uh, at what point did you feel like you needed to bring your own voice into the film? Um, and um, uh, and can you talk a little more also about some of those ethics that you were dealing with in terms of working with the family in the movie?
Yeah, I think like at the very beginning, it was very difficult to, shoot a lot. Because as a filmmaker, I definitely feel the family, they had a lot of burden, especially, their priority was looking for their daughter. So they were really devastating and always in deep grief all the time. And Shirley and I, we just didn't want to put additional burden on them. And they were, of course, shy in front of camera. They were not familiar with all these things. So for us, we just visit the family once a week. And most of the time we spent with them was without camera. We were just there, being there, chatting with them, just like other volunteers, because the family, they were really lonely being in a foreign country, didn't know about the language and the culture, and they were almost like rely on local volunteers to continue their journey.
Mm.
So at first, there were a lot of situations, I would ask myself whether I should film right now, or when the mom was in deep grief, or whether it was ethical. And I just feel like I had too many ethical questions. So I reached out to Gordon Quinn at Cartoon Quinn Films. He's a master about all the issues, all the ethical issues. So I talked to him whether it's appropriate for me to get that close to the family, and for the audience, what kind of world I really want to present to the audience, whether it's too much and emotional wise, whether like me as a filmmaker can really handle all these. And I also talked to Brent and Diane, and they all gave me a lot of suggestions and really taking care of my own like mental health when I wasn't really know what I should do. And the family, I think we just spent a lot of time with them, and they got used to, I mean, they became familiar with us, just being there, spending time with them, and they were like happy to share more their thoughts with us. And I definitely saw a lot of reporters, Western reporters interviewing the family, but I think due to the limit of the maybe the style, that was more about like breaking news. Sometimes the family would only have maybe 10 seconds sound bites. And in the final product, it was always Ying's mom. She was crying, breaking down, and Ying's father, he was always kind of, repeating their desire that they wanted to find Yingying. But
Yeah.
for me, that's a really, I would say like a victim stereotype.
Right.
And me as someone, came from the same culture as Ying's parents, I just feel like there are much more behind headlines. And that's also why we wanted to make the film.
Mhm.
And later on, I think for me, we didn't really, really figure out a perfect guideline to kind of guide myself to
Mhm.
navigate, the ethical situations. It was always case by case.
Yeah.
Something worked today, but tomorrow might not work. But anyways, I just feel like as long as we kept communication with them, everyone were on the same page, we were actually okay at the end of the day.
And I think, yeah, I hear you, and I feel like every film I make, it's always a moral, ethical quandary. You know, the stages you go through. There's no kind of I don't think there's a rule book, and I think a filmmaker has to define their own ethical rules and set up their own kind of comfortability, you know. And I know there are filmmakers who are willing to push more and uncomfortably more, and I know that there are filmmakers who won't go there. And so I think there's a constant unending battle like that.
Yeah, and you asked the question like, how did we decide that Jenny should be part of the film? It was very connected to the whole ethical question. In the beginning, at work in progress screenings, people would say like, why are you telling the story? She wasn't part of it. So what is the thinking behind telling the story? Is it just to not take advantage of the family, but tell a more sensational story? Or what is your connection? And the more that people ask, what is her connection? The more we talked about, maybe we have to show the connection. And luckily, Jenny, in all the footage, because Shalyn was with her, there were clips of her with the family. And so we started integrating that first. And then we started working on the diaries. And when we were thinking of a voice, for 10 reasons, we used Jenny's voice. So she became even more involved. But it was meant to be 10, a 10 voice. But the more we've heard her voice, and we tried other voices, we kept going back to Jenny sounds like the right person to tell this story as well,
hands
to
down,
tell the
right.
diary.
That was such a, I think, precise decision to make, and also does there's a technique of personalizing, you know, and personalizing that voice of Yingying, you know, as well, and you know, I don't think it's such a far leap to make the connection between both Jenny and Yingying, you know, and it's just really done so tastefully. You know, it's just like I could talk for like an hour about you know, some of the nuances in the film, but what were some of the challenges that you faced when you were structuring the movie? You know, I think there was this idea that you had to wait for the trial. There was a 2-year, I mean, and the entire process took how long to document? It was like what?
Yeah, we started filming in 2017 and 17,
The
yeah, and
beginning
2
of it,
years. Like the trial ended in 2019. So like the filming process was like 2 years.
Yeah, so we were editing before the trial, even before the trial, because it came out in 2020 and the trial didn't even end to the end of 2019. To the end of the summer 2019.
You had to open it up. You mean you kind of had to open it back up, or just keep it open so
just
that you
keep it open? So we're editing along the way, so that we worked on the other parts while we're waiting for the trial to happen. And then Jenny and Shalyn, I mean, I give them so much credit. I keep going back to this. They were at the trial every day listening. And sometimes they didn't even get to shoot at all, but they were just part of supporting the family there.
Sometimes Sorry,
no,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so then we really had to, once the trial was over, we had just a couple of months to finish the film, to be ready by 2020.
I want to talk about a couple moments in this film that kind of are remarkable, you know. And I had a professor. In fact, my old professor was my first producer of my film Up the Yangtze, and so I find that I love having people like Brent, you know, and Diane, these mentors who can also kind of guide us as filmmakers who are trying to learn and you know, capture the story we want to tell. But there's 2 moments that struck me very, very, very deeply, which was that moment you caught the pigeon that hit the window and died with Ying's boyfriend. Can you tell me a little bit about that moment and how that happened? And obviously it was kind of quite a remarkable thing.
Yeah, so I think at that day we were just filming Xiaolin, Ying's boyfriend, near Ying's old apartment. We were just there. He was talking about, the time they spent together. And all of a sudden we just heard, something like hit the
Yeah.
wall. And then we just saw the like pigeon. And I think at first Xiaoling, he still wanted to like rescue it. But in the final film, we only saw maybe 1 minute, and then Xiaoling started to, dig a hole and bury it. But it was like, I think a while, in the
Mhm.
on that day, we didn't think about what we're gonna do with this scene. When we were filming, we just kept the camera rolling and let the moment happen. And Xiaoling, for me, I mean, in post production, when I watched through all the footage and saw that scene again, I really feel like there like something behind that. And I think recently Xiaoling, he did an interview with um, a news outlet in China. They specifically talk about that scene, and Xiaoling, he actually feel like that was the moment Yingying came back. And I know
I
that
thought,
in
yeah,
our Chinese culture,
yeah,
people always want to bring their family to their home, and we also include one scene in the film, fallen leaves return to their roots, and it always the families hope to bring back. And in reality, they right now she's still out there, out in the US. And for Xiaoling, that was like also like a very touching moment for himself.
yeah.
And in the film, we actually have different bird icons, like somewhere, like the
That's right.
film title,
That's right.
we have a bird there. And
Yeah.
in the postcard
Yes,
that Ying sent to her friends, she also drew like a small
you drew it.
bird.
Yeah.
Yes, so we did that. It's also like a metaphor, so yeah.
And it's a beautiful metaphor, exactly placed at the perfect moment too in the film. And I love those moments where you sit in the visual moment, and the weight of everything that came before kind of carries through into that visual scene. And it's so good. I mean, and that I think I was going to make a point about my professor, and the point was that he always told me there's only you need, in a very crass way, he's told me you only need 3 good moments in a movie, and then you've got it. But I would say
I
that
have to
there's a
remember
couple,
that.
yeah, there's a couple others that were quite moving to me too. I mean, that the fact that you caught that moment of grief, and how couples, parents deal with grief. The argument at the kitchen table, and that is a moment that, that you got that because you spent time with them. And so I wonder if you could talk about that day and what was happening around that.
Yeah, so that day we were just, filming their breakfast actually. And we didn't really expect what's gonna happen next. And all of a sudden they talk about online rumors that was really attacking them and hurting them. And then I feel like, the parents, they started to, yell at each other. And for me, to be honest, I didn't really have time to react to the situation. I think like in my mind, I thought about whether I should whether I should keep filming or not. But I didn't. I mean, I still kept the camera rolling. But I think maybe just like 1 or 2 minutes later, I just feel like the fight is going to be like a big fight. So I actually turned off my camera and started to, stop the fight. So in the film, I mean, on that day, we actually have 2 people, filming. So when I turned off the camera, I started filming. I was actually in the shot. I was in the shot when I was trying to, separate the parents. So if you still remember that scene in the film, we actually, after we saw Ying's mother, she turned over the table.
Yeah.
We cut it to like close up. That was the time I was actually in the shot. So for me, I thought a lot about that scene. Even today, really thought about basically the loss of Ying, like how important Ying was to everyone around her, and her disappearance really had a deep impact, on everyone. And also really think about, as a filmmaker, what kind of role we are when we are with our, with the participants of the film. And for me, like when I was in school, I learned that, we should be a fly on the wall, don't really kind of interfere, people's lives, things like that. And also really think about, like what the difference between a documentary filmmaker and a journalist. So these are the things I'm still thinking about like today. Yeah, but as a friend of volunteer, it was just very devastating, you know, witnessing that scene, that moment.
We
Yeah.
were nervous about. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I was going to say, just back to the Young's professor
Yeah.
comment. That was definitely one of my three, one of my three,
yeah.
one of the three essential scenes. And for me, I always really related to the mother's character. I have a young daughter, and if something happened to her, I would just,
I mean, that,
I would crumble. I would be
yeah.
the weeping, you know, moaning.
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
mean, that brought up, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that fight scene to me isn't this kind of sensational moment. Oh, look at these two
No.
having this fight. To me, it's so relatable. Like, you know, the loss of, you know, their daughter is going to rip the family apart, and it's
Yeah.
never going to end. Like, there's never a point where it's over. It's
Yep.
just an ongoing process, and I think Jenny just did a phenomenal job
Oh, so it's
covering it, and just I really felt it.
I mean, that pitch that you get about the pitch of the tone, I mean, of the emotional tone of that, that is what I mean by it becoming about drama and family drama and sort of the universality of grieving, anger. You know, I see it in fiction films that I can think about. Like there was one called Prisoners by Denis Villeneuve, and it was about the same kind of scenario, but in this film, the parents get to act out their anger, you know, directly, right, to the perpetrator, and that's what I feel. Like, I mean, I think when you bring up the anger around capital, capital punishment, and I've talked to my wife about this, about our daughter. You know, it's just, man, this film makes you kind of stop and think about that moment, you know, like.
Yeah, we had many conversations like that. Like our editor, John Farbrother, I remember talking to him about it, and we were both saying we don't believe in capital punishment and death sentence. And he said, but as we were going deep into the story, going, you know, this is the first time we're going, well, you really think about it. What is that? Maybe that is the right punishment, but it really makes you think about these questions. I was going to say about that scene, we were nervous about how the parents would see that scene. You know, the Asian Chinese are very private about their showing their emotions to other people, and I remember when Jenny said she was going to show it to the family. That was the number one thing I was like worried, like how will they react, and Jenny can say like how they reacted to that.
Yeah, so we always wanted to show the film before it's going to be in like public festivals, and we wanted to make sure that the family, they're okay with, you know, what's going out, and that was also our promise when we first started working with them. We wanted to show the film with the family in person because of course, you know, it's going to be a very tough film for them to watch, and we didn't want to throw them a link to let them to sit through that. But because of COVID, we just couldn't travel. So I ended up having two friends in China. They traveled to Ying's hometown and showed the film from there. And Shilling and I, we just Skype in. So to try to make it feel like we are watching the film real time with the family and being there, supporting them. Ying's mom, she started crying when the film just started, when she heard about all the news reportings, things like that. And Ying's father, he was pretty calm, you know, throughout the whole process. And again, just like Diane said, we were particularly worried about certain scenes in the film, including the fight, and also other scenes that, you know, Ying's mom breaking down, things like that. But after the screening, actually the family, they were okay with, you know, what we have right now, and they were glad that we made the film document their hardship and still express the message that they still wanted to, you know, to search for Yingying, to bring her home, and they feel like, you know, including the fight, you know, the fight scene, that was just what happened, and people didn't see that, you know, in in like daily news, and that's why we wanted to go that deep, into the story. Yeah, so right now we only show the film at a festival in China. I mean, we had like 2 screenings, but we didn't really have any formal like distribution in China right now. So the family, they're still hoping that we can show the film in China and let people to memorize Yingying, in a good way, and really to celebrate her life. And that's what we are working on right now.
Oh, that's good. And I think it could be just for the Chinese audience, I could imagine it be very revealing and healing in terms of how parents can deal with, these problems with, around emotion and grief and such, and yeah, I really hope that that gets widely seen in mainland China, and I'm sure it would be very successful. You won an award, a pretty big award in China for this film, did you not?
Yeah, we just won China Academy Award of documentary films. We were the Finding Ying is the winner of best foreign language documentary. And we were really happy that it got recognition in China. And to be honest, when we were making the film, we were thinking about how American audience or English speaking audience and the Chinese audience, how they are going to react to the film, whether there will be a difference. But I think right now it seems that both audience, they react to the film positively, and it means that this is a universal story. It's not just a story about a Chinese girl went missing in the US. It's something related to many people, no matter where you came from, what your cultural background is.
I mean, I feel like it's such a layered film. There's so many different subjects, themes that you could take apart and think about. One of them is about the U.S. justice system, and I'm curious, Jenny, like as an outside observer, I mean, and you're seeing it through the eyes of the family. But what was your feeling around that? As you were witnessing the trial.
Yeah, so for me, like personal perspective, I knew nothing about the U.S. criminal justice system. So for me, being with the family, experiencing their frustration, and also basically navigate the system with them together. And for me, like the making of the film was a learning process for me as well. On the one hand, I understand this is just the US law, and it has to be it has to be this way. But on the other hand, it's just very devastating to see the family without knowing the how everything's going on. And sometimes in the film, when we were in the China with the family, like Ying's mom, she actually asked, would US I just give up on my daughter? Why nothing really happened? For them, it was really frustrated. And this film really want to present like both sides. We are not really blaming the US criminal justice system. We still interview the prosecutors, the FBI, and the police to show what kind of work they've done, and also to show to provide basic facts of the crime. But on the other hand, we wanted to show the family's feelings and to really let the audience to experience their hardship, to understand what cultural differences and the language barrier really make a difference in the story.
And so then that brings me to that final moment that in the movie that is just that made me burst out into tears, is the moment of that the girlfriend of the murderer who came in and wanted to give that speech. And tell me, how did that come about? How did you connect that? And what were you going through with that? For me, it would have been so, knowing that it would have been really important, but also so awkward, like as a director, how to navigate that. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so we reached out to Tara actually through a court clerk. I don't think I was allowed to talk to her directly, so I just wrote a letter to her and let that person basically pass along my my message to her. And it was actually the girlfriend Tara. She reached out to us. To be honest, I didn't really have any how to say that, like perception or any like judgment on her before I talked to her. From my perspective, the only message or information I knew before I talked to her directly was that she worked with FBI, and her testimony was so important that basically it was like really crucial to the whole case, to the trial.
Yeah.
And then when we got connected, we started to writing to each other through email, and she was actually so thoughtful, and that really break the stereotype that the media has already created on her. And she actually expressed a desire that she wanted to meet the family, and really wanted to talk about her feelings and to show her support. And I also talked to the family and learned that the family actually also wanted to meet Tara. So I just bring them together and help make this meeting happen. Yeah, so for me, like this film, when people watching, when we were applying for grants, cutting short work samples, a common question was about how do you make the audience like engage in watching the film. And this is a sad story. What are the hope or optimism in the film? And from my perspective, there are different elements. One is, of course, Ying herself. She's such bright character in the film. But on the other hand, we actually also saw a lot of people, they are helping the family, not just from the Chinese community, but also from American community. And we also wanted to show the humanity behind the tragedy. And I believe Tara, she was one of them, behind the whole tragedy. And that's why, I wanted to include her in the film.
It's just so right, I think. And when I watch it now in the context of the world that we're in right now, it just seems, it just fits really well to see that there is this willingness to sit with someone at the same table and cross over to meet each other.
Yeah, and I give Tara a lot of credit too, because so many of the news outlets reached out to her wanting to get her to speak on their shows. And she picked this film, to work with Jenny. And it says a lot to Jenny in her letter. I never read her letter she wrote to her. She wanted to do this film because of what Jenny wrote and knowing her intent with the film. And it was amazing coincidence that she had studied Chinese.
That is just wild.
Yeah, that was just
an
added surprise that she had studied in high school. Was it Jenny? The Mandarin. So Jenny just had to coach her. She asked her, how do I say this? But she had that general background already.
And I mean, it really is Tara's extraordinary bravery that brings the killer in. That she wears a wire knowing what's at stake, and it's just.
Was it hard to get that footage? Was it hard to get that recording and the permission for that?
You mean like as a filmmaker, or
that? As I would imagine, I don't even know how you get the permission to get evidence like that. So I'm just curious how that happened.
Yeah, so because this was a high profile case, actually all the evidence, majority of the evidence were published on the website of the court. So we got that part. And Shirley and I, we actually started filming before the perpetrator was arrested. So if you still remember, like in the film, there were like some footage that we actually captured him on camera. That's our own footage. So we were just there, filming. And when we learned that, the police arrested suspect, and he actually went to the walk and the concert, we just watched through all the footage we shot, and we actually found him in our footage. So that was really, was really like a bizarre and also like frightening. You just think
totally haunting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder, I wonder if there's something, a capsule in which you want to kind of end a thought for us here, and how you want an opportunity to give a little note to the audience, maybe, about whatever you want to say about your film, and then I think we'll kind of wrap it up after this.
Yeah, I would say, the message we wanted the audience to walk away is, how extraordinary Ying was, and how much her life has touched others. And just thanks everyone, for watching the film and spreading the words. And just like I mentioned before, the film is going to celebrate Ying's life. And for me, Ying actually became, the sort of like inspiration in my life. And I believe for many people, we are actually carrying on her spirit. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Diane, Brent, Jenny. This was really moving, and thank you for making such a fantastic and important movie. And so I guess at that we leave, and this film will carry on in me, and I'll be thinking about it for months and months. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Young. And thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to Cam too.
Thank you so much, Young and Cam.